Hello everyone. So in this video we'll be looking at the basics of TypeScript and why we are using it. TypeScript is nothing but a superset of JavaScript. So any code you have written so far in JavaScript is also a TypeScript code. It can help us declare types for various variables, parameters or functions that we are using in our code. And thus it will help us avoid various runtime errors that could occur because of type mismatch. It also improves the code readability and maintainability. Alright, now let's have a look at the basics of TypeScript and how we can write code into TypeScript. So TypeScript provides us few basic types like number, boolean, string, void, any, object, array, etc. We can have also look at the documentation which provides all the basic types. Alright, so now in order to start with the TypeScript code, we can create a file with .ts extension and let's declare a variable called string with hello world. Here we haven't mentioned any type for this particular variable, but it has implicitly taken it as a string. So now if I try to assign some different value to it, it will throw me an error that number is not assignable to string. Okay. Now in order to explicitly mention the type for this variable, we can use colon and then the type name with the variable. So this creates this adds type to particular variables. Now similarly we can also have a boolean variable, we can have a number variable, sometimes while writing code you are not aware of what type of value this particular variable can have. So in that case you can assign multiple types as well. Example, let's say I don't know whether it will have a string or a number, and then I can say it can have either string or number. So now it can also accept the string value, but it cannot accept the boolean value. Similarly, if you are not aware about any type of value that this variable can have, then you can assign it as type any. So let's say myvar can be of type any, and now it can have an object, it can be a boolean, etc. Alright, so this was basic of how you can declare variable with some basic types. Now if you want to define your own types, how you can do that? So we have a keyword called type, and then we can specify some type name, whether let's say I want to have my own type for string and number, and then I can say that it can have either string or number. So as you saw that earlier we used to declare with when we were having string or number, we used to declare type string or number, but now we have this own custom type which we can assign to any variable, and it will have string or number only. Similarly, while working with objects, we might want to have a specific shape for any particular object. Example, let's say I have a person object which can have some specific properties only. So I can say type person can have name which can be of type string, it can be age of type number. Now my person might have an optional property called email of type string, but in order to define it as optional we need to use question mark operator over here. So this makes this property optional. Now if we want to create an object for person, then it's very simple. I can say p1 is of type person and it can have name, age. That's it. So this is how we can define our own custom types for particular shape of objects. Also, along with the types, we have something called interfaces in TypeScript, which can allow us to do the similar kind of job. So interface person, name, string, age, number, and optional property called email of type string. So we can either use interface or type depending on the requirement over here. Alright, so I hope this is clear about how we can define our custom type and interfaces in TypeScript, because this will be using majorly with React components where we want to define specific shape of props. Alright, now let's see how we can declare functions over here. So let's say I have a function called greetPerson, which takes a person parameter and returns a string called hello person.name. So now we know that parameter will be of type person, so we can assign it a person type that we have declared earlier, and we know that this function returns only string, so we can specify the return type for this function by adding colon at the end of function a function declaration. So now if I try to return something other than string, let's say I'm trying to return a person itself, then also it will throw me an error that it's not assignable to string. Alright, and now we can call this function in a similar way, that is greetPerson with p1. We don't have p1. Okay, let's create p1 of type person having name and age. I hope this is clear, that is how to declare a function and the return types, and how to assign types to the parameters of function as well. Alright, so next we will see how import works in TypeScript. Let's say I'm dealing with some list and trying to manipulate that list. Example, I have const a which is having 2, 1 and 2. Actually, let's create a different file so that we also have the code context that we have written earlier. And let's say I want to get a unique array out of this particular array. So what we usually do, we try to use some third-party library like Lodash. So I will try to add it. As you can see, one node module is added over here, so we can import but we can see there is some warning, that is type declaration is missing for Lodash. Now what is this is trying to say, that Lodash is a pure JavaScript library, so we might not be able to use it with TypeScript because all the types are not mentioned over there for functions that are available in this library. So TypeScript community has done a great job of maintaining the type declaration for most of the famous libraries. So what we can do is we can add a types library for Lodash. Now before adding this kind of libraries, you need to make sure that they are available under types definition, so that you are not adding any unknown libraries. and now we can see that the error is gone, and we can say that it should be now underscore dot unique. So this is how you will be able to use some third-party libraries and importing them into your TypeScript code. Alright, I hope this was clear, and now we will see how we can compile this code and get the JavaScript out of it, because ultimately browser can understand only JavaScript, and also the node execution runtime can also understand JavaScript only. So what we will try to do is we will try to compile this code, and in order to compile this code you need a TypeScript compiler. Now let's first install TypeScript compiler. We can install it using npm install -g TypeScript. So this added a new command line tool called tsc. We can verify via tsc version. Okay, so now we can see that tsc command is working in our console, so we can use it to compile our code. Now let's say I want to compile my index.ts, so I'll just say tsc index.ts, and we can see that it has generated a JavaScript out of it, like function, then the variable that we declared, and it is using the same console statement over here. So this is how we can convert TypeScript into JavaScript. But usually while working with a lot of different libraries, we might want to add some compilation options for our TypeScript code. So either we can do it by adding it onto the command line, or we can also have one configuration file called tsconfig.json, where we can mention all the compiler options. Now let's say by default it is currently exporting into ES3, and we want to change the target of compilation to ES next. We can see that it has generated a JavaScript file, but this time it is using const instead of where, because we specified that the target should be ES next. So this is how you can specify multiple compiler options. There is a long list of compilation options that are available. You can check into the documentation for that. Alright, so now next we would like to see how we can use TypeScript with React. So till now we were using normal JavaScript code, but now we will be using a React code, which is JSX, right? So similarly we can have component.tsx instead of JSX, where we will be importing star as React from React. And then let's see how we can define a functional component. Which will have some props, and it will return a div with props.name. Now while writing a React code, we till now we used to use the prop types library from React in order to define the shape of props and what all props value it can have. But now with the TypeScript we can just use interface to define the type for props. Let's say I have only one prop called name, and in order to define type we can just use parameter colon its type will be iProps. So this is how you can define the functional component in React. Next, let's look at how we can create a class component which is having some state. So class my component extends React.component render returns a d with name that a component has. So now in order to validate the props for this particular component, we will be just using iProps that we have defined earlier in following manner. That is, we define it as a generics for this particular class, and then it can have iProps. Similarly, if we want to also validate the state of this particular component, then we can say that interface iState is active can be boolean, and then along with the iProps we can also assign iState, which will automatically validate the state of this particular component. Now sometimes you might have a case where you don't have props but only state, so in that case you can just mention an empty object over here. If it's only props, then it's not an issue because we can just say iProps and these angular brackets. I hope this was clear to all of you. Still, if you have some doubts, we'll be writing most of our code in this tutorial using TypeScript, so that will make things more and more clear for you. Thank you.